Today's episode of Wine and Dime is sponsored by Rooted Planning Group, a fee-only financial planning firm that believes life is about events, supported by your dollars and cents. And we want to help you achieve your goals. Hop on over to www.rootedpg.com to learn more about the services. Every week, it's my goal to share financial information that helps you in both your life and Financial Vineyard. We hope it takes you from your roots to the journey of your vines and the influences in the air that have helped craft your delicious life. Like wine, life and finances have different palates that should be celebrated and not judged. Hello, podcast listeners. This is Amy Irvine, owner and founder of Rooted Planning Group. We are super excited not only to do this podcast also live and with video, but to have a guest at today's podcast. I'm really super excited to have Paula Lesso here today joining the podcast. Paula, welcome, and looking forward to sharing your journey because you have quite a story to tell. So looking forward to it. But as you know, Paula, one of the things that I always love to start out the podcast with is my second passion, which is wine. Do you have a particular favorite wine that you enjoy?
Well, being from this area, one of my favorites is Salmon Run Riesling. And yeah, that's to me just a very smooth, nice, medium Riesling that I enjoy.
Yeah, certainly the Finger Lakes is known for their Rieslings. That's something that they're very well known for throughout the world, starting to make their ways with some of the reds that they're growing here locally, but definitely their Rieslings are fairly well known. In fact, I was out in Oregon last year and they were commenting on the New York Rieslings way out from Oregon. Yeah, it was an interesting conversation that we had with some of the winemakers out there. Paula is local to the Finger Lakes area, as she mentioned, and she and I met at one of the women's conference actually last year. And instantly, Paula and I just made an amazing connection about not only some of the services that cross over between the two of us, but also just the way that we treat clients in general and the compassion that we try to offer to many of our clients. But Paula's story is a little bit different than Amy's story for sure. Paula, I would love to open up this podcast today by you because you're so kind to share this with me and with all of the folks that you work with so that they know, that when you're offering the services, you're not just doing it from a place of education, you're actually doing it from a journey that you went on yourself. So if you wouldn't mind kind of giving a sort of a high level story, journey explanation of how you started your own business, what do you offer for client services, and how you got to this point.
Absolutely. Well, Amy, thank you again for having me on. I'm really super excited to be here and to share my story. As you mentioned, I help women going through divorce and actually was married to my high school sweetheart. And after 18 years of being comfortably married, there was a point at which I was like, where did the passion go? Where was the passion? Where did it go? And when did it go? Because I think after a certain length of time, you just get, as I said, comfortable in a marriage. And it was almost like we were living like roommates. And I set up counseling and I can picture myself right there that day going, so how do I get the passion back in my marriage? I never wanted the D word to be part of my vocabulary. That was just like, And unfortunately, my husband figured out how to solve his problem. Maybe he wasn't happy and felt the passion was gone, but he decided to go a different route and solve his problem. So finding out that, he was having an affair, counseling became my personal journey to find comfort and to start living like my best life. And I was doing it for myself. I never told him because I felt that, this was for me. And so through what ended up realizing is I was grieving the loss of my marriage. So I helped me so much, just what was happening, why it was happening, and what about moving after? What about going forward? Because I just felt that this was just something happening in my life. And yeah, there were days that what was me? I had the pity party. I cried, why me? All that. And then there was something inside of me that just was like, but you're stronger than this. You've got this. You can go on. There is life beyond marriage or after marriage, right? There's life after divorce. And so with that counseling, which helped me immensely, it's what I tell people, friends and family are great, but they know everything that happened. They can say, yeah, well, I never liked him anyways, or whatever it might be, right? Or yeah, he was like this, he was controlling, right? Friends and family are great. But, and I had a wonderful friend and all, she'd been through a divorce, and she would just sit there and hand me Kleenex so I could at least get it out, right? So you need that kind of a friend, but you also need a person that, as I say, that third party objective person, kind of like you are with your financial people. They're in the depth of what's going on with their finances, but you see it clearly from a different perspective. So that's where I can help women in that way. And I always thought that I wanted to be a counselor. And I took a class that I learned about life coaching and what that was. It was like, whoa, that's what I want to do. So I worked on that and became a life coach, and then realized that my divorce was the largest piece of, I want to say that affected my life the most was the divorce. It was like, wow. So I really want to help women realize that they're not alone in this, that they have a lot to offer, no matter how it happened, even if they want it, if they're the ones that want the divorce, or if they got blindsided like I did, right? It's like, it's okay. You can get through this, and, not sometimes you want to just curl up on the couch with the pint of Haagen-Dazs and watch a Hallmark movie or something, right? But it's like, okay, you can have that once or twice, just don't live it that way, right? So we can get out there and we can forge ahead, because that is just one part of your life, right? Just one piece of your life, a chapter. And there are so many more chapters to live. Right?
And for you then took it at the next step and actually, so you're running your own company right now where you're providing that sort of coaching.
Yeah.
Which is different than therapy or counseling, but it's coaching. And you also have written a book.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about, clearly the pain that you had to go through was a significant journey in your life, but you decided to take that into this new direction, which was one, a book, and two, the coaching services. So tell us about the book, and then tell us about your coaching services that you offer right now.
Yeah. So the book is What Are You Waiting For? Today's the best day to start living. And that's kind of what it looks like. So, yeah. And I had never thought about writing a book, but actually that picture on the front was on my business cards. And I had two people at two different times say, "Ooh, that's a book cover." They're like, "Oh, maybe I'm writing a book." And yeah, right. And I had a business partner at the time when I lived in Charlotte, and I looked at him, and he was another coach. And this is the thing, to coaches say, maybe I might, right? It's like, and he just gave me a look. I go, "I'm writing a book." And so then it was just, it's like, okay, no, I got my assignment. I'm writing the book. And it's about what are all the things that we wait for in life, that we don't take that leap, like we hesitate, right? You want to, but something's holding you back. So it was like, okay, I just got to write this book? So I asked that question about a lot of things. What's holding you back here to do, did you want to ask something? Do you want to do something? What are you waiting for? And so it's neat because it's just little short things and an easy read. So it was there to activate your mind, body, self-talk, resilience, everything that you're going through, right? So
it's a complement to your coaching services for sure. And tell us a little bit about the coaching service itself with your business structure. Like how does that look?
Well, the biggest thing for me is helping women through the 3 H's. So I have the 3 H's to happiness. It's all about starting with your head, where there are all the drama, the stories, been there. Because like I said, I've been through divorce. So I've been there and we want to get clarity. So I help them get clarity. So then when they come to you, right, and you're asking about finances, they're not filling up the time with everything else. They are ready for what you need and have that information. Then to the heart, your heart is broken. It's shielded, right? And it's like I help them to know what do they want in their heart, right? It's what do you really want? And then your health. And I've been there. There was anxiety. There was all these things that happening, eating, not eating, losing weight, gaining weight. I was there. So getting them healthy, because all of that equals happiness. It's the 3 H's to happiness is what I help them with. Talk to them, find out where they're at in their process, whether it's thinking about, a go, no-go situation, because a no-go is like, maybe you're unhappy and you think divorce is the only way out. And maybe it's just you're both unhappy and you have to reconnect. Or it could be a go. We have to go. And then if you're in the process of a divorce, helping you with that, and post-divorce, because post-divorce can be just as emotional sometimes as going through all the divorce itself. It's really tough. So, we talk about where the woman is at that time, and then what can I help them with? The different strategies that we're going to go through to help them with getting them to happiness, getting them through those stages.
And the go, no-go side of things, I want to take a step back and actually talk a little bit about that, because that is a little bit different than a lot of other divorce coaching services I've seen, because in that situation, you're actually trying to prevent, you'd love it if it was a no-go, right? The ideal situation is to talk people through what's going on or coach people through what's going on and have it be a no-go outcome. So when you're talking people through that and having them, I'm assuming having them ask some questions to each other, like trying to determine what has brought them to you for these coaching services to decide whether they should take the next step. I would say in those situations, correct me if I'm wrong, Paula, but it's probably not a super hostile situation. It's that people are sort of you had indicated when you first started talking, like you felt like you had lost the spark after 18 years. And look, I've been married 29, and when people are, almost 29 in a week. So when people say to me, oh, what's the secret? I'm like, bear through the cycles. I think that, it's a long-term friendship. It is a long-term friendship. But the spark isn't every day. It comes and goes, right? And I think sometimes realistically, people don't think of it. This is just my opinion, but I don't think you would notice the spark if the spark was there every single day. But it's there enough that you feel still very committed to the relationship, very much in love, like, yeah, you can create a spark if you want to, like all of those things, and that's why I always joke and say bear through the cycles, because you can't, we don't have any children, but, my career has definitely been our child, in my opinion. And Brent has been a godsend through taking care of his dad and then later his mom. And so we've had some pretty significant challenges in our life. And yet we're always able to kind of come back to a central point and laugh together and, have fun together and not feel like roommates, like that's, I guess the feeling that you said, and not to make this about me as an example, but just to say like, okay, so I'm the person that if I came to you and said, Paula, it used to be this way, like the way I just explained it to you, but lately it's really tough to get that spark going. And I don't know if it's just, does that mean that we're doomed or, how do we get through that cycle? Like, what do we do to get through that cycle? And it doesn't even have to be somebody that's married 29 years. It could be married 1 year, right? So what would be some of the things that you would, not very high level, because of course we don't want anybody to consider this as advice because every situation is different, but very high level, what would you suggest to somebody that came to you for those reasons?
Sure. That's a great question. First, I would ask them, what brought you together? What was it that attracted you that you're like, yeah, I want to spend the rest of my life with this person? What were those qualities? And I know, write it down. If people don't like the word journal, which a lot of people don't know I don't like to journal, write these things down. Because sometimes seeing it written and you actually write it out is like, oh my gosh, I've forgotten that. It's so far, kind of removed right now that I don't remember. And then also look at, I love this book, The 5 Love Languages.
Yep.
5 love languages. That is huge when you think about someone could be the husband and his love language is different than hers. So he's thinking he's doing the right things when he's not. And she's not saying anything. We're not speaking up. So one of my quotes that I developed is, communication is the heart of any relationship. And that could be any relationship, friends, work, especially your significant other. So communication is important. And people get away from that, I think, because we do get comfortable. We think we know what the other person's thinking. And sometimes we don't. So
even after 29 years of marriage, I can attest to that. Yeah. Have you ever, do you watch Netflix at all? Do you have a subscription to Netflix? Okay. Well, there's a TV show, I guess you want to call it, through a series through Netflix called Sweet Magnolias. And one of the characters, Danny Sue Sullivan, is one of the main characters in that. And she and her husband actually they went through some counseling and they talked about those 5 love languages. And then after they went through the counseling, they often will refer to their love languages. Like that's the way they communicate with each other. So I thought I'd bring that up for people that are big Netflix fans. Watch Sweet Magnolias because you can actually get a feel for what Paul is talking about right now when you talk about, and there's tons of resources online. If you Google the 5 love languages, I think there's even like tests you can take, like quizzes you can take to determine. Some people don't even know their own love language. I mean, they don't even know what their own love language is. So you can kind of get a feel for that. So you ask them the question, like what brought you together? You ask them the question you talk to them about their 5 love languages, and you coach them to communicate with each other about these kinds of things. What would be an example? Because I think if they're able to get that communication back to the table and create that spark again, it's a no-go situation. Right. But what would be an example of a no-go situation?
Of a go?
I'm sorry, a go situation. Okay. My apologies. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right. Well, I would say if there is physical or verbal abuse, that would definitely be a go situation. Unfortunate, that would be there as an option for a go. But also, like for me, blindsided, having an affair, that's there was a woman that I worked with, and, he wanted a divorce. She didn't want a divorce. Excuse me. And there's a point at which the other person is beyond. There's no turning back. Like, they've already committed to, no, I want a divorce, because they've already moved on. And yeah, you may want what you had, but it's already changed. So if they're having an affair, there's something going on that it might not be repairable. So let's look at, all right, if this is a go, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. And my biggest thing is to help protect the woman, not to settle, which you may have run across that too. Well, I don't want money, or I don't want this or that. Be careful what you say. Be careful what you're wishing for. And take time. That's what I want to say, is take your time. This isn't something to rush through, because I've seen, oh yeah, just give them everything. It's like, that gets it done quick. And yes, take your time, and also realize they may want to stretch this out. They may want to get mean. They may want to get nasty, but we can get you through that, because you know what? That's their issue, their problem. We want you on the, positive. Yes. Like I said, there's more to life than divorce.
Yeah.
And
yeah. And that's where some of the crossover services that I was talking about in the intro that I mentioned, because a lot of times I don't get them at the stage where it's the go or no go. I get them generally from a CDFA, a certified divorce financial analyst. Mm-hmm. I usually get them at that stage where they are getting divorced. And now they're looking for some financial guidance of what, somebody to coach them on what they should be doing financially for themselves. And I agree with you. It's, don't agree to anything. Let's look at everything. And depending on the state that you live in, now, Paula, you probably predominantly work with people in New York, but maybe Pennsylvania because of where you're located.
Right.
Where I work with people throughout the United States, I have to know whether they're a community property state, whether they're, a equitable versus equal state, like all of that. I have to actually dig into their property equalization and understand the timing of some of that, because some states require like a year-long waiting period, and we have to wait until that divorce is final before we can even separate assets. But it's that kind of discussion. A lot of people are like in New York State, they're thinking it's 50-50, and it's not. New York State, for example, is not a 50-50 state. It's an equitable state. It's not an equal state. It's an equitable state. So when somebody commits to something in advance and they say, oh, it's not about the money, or it's not about this, or it's not about that, I'm like, whoa, let's run some projections here, because your financial well-being is at stake. When you plan for, a period of time as two household income family, saving, one set of expenses, and all of a sudden now it's one income, separate expenses, you've just, technically divvied the income in half and doubled your expenses. That's a huge impact. So I agree with what you're saying. Like, if you discover that it's a go situation, and don't commit to anything. Let's walk into the financial decision-making of a divorce the same way you walked into the coaching decision-making, right? Like, okay, let's sit down. Let's look at all of our assets. Let's look at all of our liabilities. Let's look at all of our expenses. In an ideal world, everybody's, mature and friendly about it, but in a realistic world, that's not true.
I wish. Yeah.
I think I've done one case in my entire career where it was actually a very amicable separation, even when it came down to the financial separation of things. But most of the time it's that, it's a lot of back and forth. And again, depending on the state that you're in, equitable doesn't necessarily mean equal. So the other big mistake that I commonly see, and I shouldn't use the word mistake, that's really not the right terminology that I should use here, but what can be financially negatively impactful is when somebody says, well, I have to have the house because the kids are in the house. And they don't realize that there can be a transition period where nobody, permanently has the house. Like you can stay in the house for a period of time while the kids are finishing out school or, even high school potentially. And then at that point in time, the house is sold and you split the assets. You're not required to purchase the home in that situation. There can be negotiation and plans can be worked out so that you're not financially putting yourself at risk by taking on a non-income earning asset fully onto yourself at the time of separation and divorce. And so I was curious when you said, that you coach them, like, so if this is a go and you say, okay, don't commit to anything. At that point in time, I mean, they generally go get an attorney, right? That's the next step. And from there, the attorneys usually, the ones that I work with, they usually look at everything and do try to split it down the middle, right? I mean, they don't generally look at the equitable side versus the equal side, right? They just try to split it down the middle. I'm not saying there are some attorneys out there that don't do it that way, but that's been my experience. Have you seen that as well?
And you want to be careful about that because now my ex earned 3 more times than I did. And what I learned was that maybe, I wasn't going to be out on the street and yet not really hugely benefit from, this, because we didn't have children either. So I didn't get alimony, but it was spousal support because we were married 21 years. And, so that was huge. That I could get the spousal support. Of course, there's a percentage, I think, of
depending on how long you've been married,
married and all that stuff, right? Yep. And so, you want to be careful because, like I said, it's not equal. Very, very good. It's equitable, and so, the other thing too is what you want to get. Know what you want. Know what you want. Not be so aggressive about it, but know. And with your attorney, maybe it is a house and they don't have any problem with that, but you split things accordingly. Also, one of the things that I highly recommend so that it's not an expense later is if the woman is interested in taking her maiden name back. That's something else that they may not think about. So it's like, okay, with you, it's financial. And for me, it's like, okay, think about these other little things that you might not think about. And if you can do it while you're paying for the divorce or it's getting paid for, wrap it all in there. So you don't have that later expense. Just things like that to think about. And some won't do it because of the kids, if they have kids, same last name and all that, and they'll do it later, which is fine. But it's just some of those things, like you say, think about how important is this? Is it worth fighting over? So that's the other thing. Is it worth fighting over? These are things, right? Sometimes these are things, and sometimes you put more emotion on it because it's like, he's not going to get that, right? It's all about your emotions and all of that can kind of take over. So we want to, okay, so how are you feeling? What's the emotion? Yeah, let's put the emotion in the important stuff, right? Like moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, I think having somebody to coach you on that, because it's hard. I mean, it is grieving, and grieving has different stages of how you process what's going on emotionally and physically, right? So, I mean, it's different, and having somebody that you can talk to, whether it's a therapist or or a coach, because I think you can actually use both. Then somebody that, there's a team of people that often come together and work well when you're talking about going through this process, and having that team not have the emotional involvement that you feel, I think is really important during those periods of any stress, like any high emotion, stressful time. Having a team of people that are just looking at it purely from their angle and not that they don't care, but they're not emotionally involved in the situation, right? I think that's what's key.
Yes. And knowing, like for you and me, and I know for you, especially from, getting to know you, you have their best interest at heart. Because sometimes it seems like you're just going through the motions. To me, it's clinical. Some people that I've run into, some lawyers, some it's like, wait a minute, it's not clinical. This has to do with my life. And, you give that to them. You give them that, hey, I get it. I know what's happening here. So let's work it out the best way. Just like for me, it's like, okay, I got it. You're not alone here. We've experienced this. So this is to your advantage.
Right.
Think through these things. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that it's really important for people to take a few minutes for themselves during this entire process, like to try to move outside of, you mentioned that part of yours is also the journey, like post-divorce, right? And while you're going through it, it's hard to believe what the other side is going to look like. I think when you're going through anything, it's hard to see what the other side is going to look like. Yes. So knowing that you're going to be there, Paula, in your situation to, take them onto that other side and, continue to work with them and partner with them past the actual divorce, I think is really important. So we're right at about 30 minutes at this point in time, and I would love for people to be able to, because there's so many ifs, ands, or buts when we're talking about these things that you and I have chatted about today. How can people get a hold of you?
Okay, so my email is paula@paulalesso.com.
And Lesso is spelled Lesso. For people that are wondering. And Paula is the traditional Paula, Paual.
Paula.
Sorry. Let's start that over. Paula, and last name is Lesso, Lesso.
Yes.
So Paula@paulalesso.com. They can email you. And where can they find your book?
Well, they can find it on Amazon. For a minute, I wanted to say Zoom, Amazon. They can do it Amazon, and I am located. I can always mail one to them. I'd love to do that. Or in Corning. I live in Corning. So if somebody here in Corning was like, well, I want to, meet you or get your book, I would love to meet them and, sign it, autograph it for them and, get it to them that way. And, if there's somebody that does want to talk to me about, hey, are we a good fit? And that's the other thing too. You want to make sure for anything that you feel comfortable with that person. It's a good fit. They can reach out and give them, talk to them, half an hour consultation, just make sure this is a good fit and, just go from there. And if they say that they heard me, heard me, whatever, on the Wine and Dine podcast, I could give them like a free session.
Wow, Paula, that's very generous of you.
Thank you.
So that's extremely generous of you. Thank you very much for doing that for our listeners. Well, I hope that everybody, Paula, I hope you've enjoyed your time on the podcast. I've certainly enjoyed continuing our conversation. Paula and I are actually going to be doing an event in May of 2024 that we're super pumped about in Corning. So for those of you that aren't located in Corning, feel free to schedule some plans in May of 2024. We'll keep the date. I'll keep you posted as we nail down the date, but we're looking kind of the middle of Corning or middle of May. And we're going to be doing an event for women at a local Root for Rise, was a wellness center here in Corning. If you're from Corning and you're listening to this podcast, stay tuned. We're going to have more information. But we're really excited about this event that we're going to be planning. So it's Paula, myself, and Root to Rise Wellness Center. No connection to Rooted Planning Group, just very ironic that their name is also Rooted. Paula, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to be here with us. We've really enjoyed this podcast. We hope all of our listeners have also enjoyed this podcast. If you have, please feel free to share it with your friends, family members, tuck it away as a saved podcast where you listen to us. Hop on over to iTunes and rate us so that more people like you can find our podcast. Thanks, everyone.
And that will about do it for today's episode of Wine and Dine. You can contact Amy through the website, www.rootedpg.com, or amy@rootedpg.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram @rootedpg for the latest news. And if you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like to hear about, feel free to let us know. And don't forget to rate and subscribe the show wherever you get your podcasts. And again, thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next time.